So I don't even think that this is the first part of this story like I thought it was. Because like the events of Aliens Fire and Stone clearly happened before this book. But when this was all first collected, and I think when I first read it, I read it in the order of Prometheus first. And the collected edition, the hardcover, was Prometheus, the Complete Fire and Stone. So it was like the title of the whole collection of the book to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
But I think later printings printed the Aliens story first. That one might have printed the Aliens story first.
I was just going to say, I believe that when they were releasing it, I believe the Prometheus arc part of this was the first one that was released.
Okay.
So even if it's not chronologically the first one in the story,
Sure.
It's intended to be the first one.
Okay, it's the reverse of the movie where it was not the first movie released, but intended to take place before the other movie.
Apparently.
Weird.
Pretty much, yeah.
So they just flipped the script on this. That's confusing. And honestly, at the end of the day, I don't know how much I really care if we're going out of order, because it's comic books, man. That's what they do. They probably maybe they were published the same weeks even. I don't know. And I don't really care to look it up either. Let's not look up release dates for these.
I believe this isn't me looking it up. This is me just trying to recall the information I happened to come across while skimming the page last night.
Yes.
I believe this one and whatever one is part 2 of this arc, I believe were released not quite simultaneously. I think they were released alternate weeks. So Prometheus issue 1 would come out, then the next week Aliens issue 1 or whichever one it was.
Sure.
And that alternated, and then as one of them would stop running, they would just start printing the next one in its place until it got through all 4 arcs.
All 4 books? That makes sense.
Yeah. I believe. I'm not 100% sure. Like I said, I just skimmed the box, but I think that's how it worked.
Okay. Makes sense. I guess, as much as comics publishing makes sense,
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. But we haven't introduced ourselves or the show yet, so we should do that, shouldn't we?
Yeah, it'd probably be helpful,
Welcome, everyone, to Crew Expendable, the podcast all about anything in the Alien franchise that we can get our hands on, broadcasting live. Well, not really live. There's a space delay from the USCSS podcast. I am space documentarian Neal.
And I am, let's go with Crew Dr. Kenny.
Crew Dr. Kenny, and we're just a couple of broken jars of black goo oozing our way through the Alien franchise.
That is certainly a very evocative way to put it, yes.
Just a couple of deacon monkeys swinging our way through the Alien franchise.
I love those little monkey guys so much.
And we just read Prometheus, Fire and Stone, issues 1 through 4 from Dark Horse Comics.
We certainly did.
This was the very first comic book series with the Prometheus name on the cover. I think 1 of 2 series, right? There was this and then Life and Death, the sequel. And those were the only 2, although both of those series also got a epilogue comic that was also released under the Prometheus name. Sure.
So technically there were 4 different Prometheus comics, but there were only 2 arcs that a Prometheus comic was published for.
And this was Dark Horse's effort to, I think they did the whole Fire and Stone arc to relaunch their Predator book, but also to bring the Prometheus mythology into their line of Aliens comics, which they certainly did.
They certainly went out of their way to do that. Yes, that's correct.
But boy, they left our friend the Deacon behind in all of this. To the point where the Deacon was planned, I think, to be in the Predator series, and they just 20th Century Fox nixed that idea and made them replace the Deacon with the Xenomorph, which was very confusing to me because I remembered promotional art featuring the Deacon, and then I was expecting the Deacon in this book, but no, we just got straight up Xenomorphs in this, dude.
This will be the first time that we've covered something on the show that has actual ass Xenomorphs in it. That's correct.
Absolutely insane that it's a Prometheus comic first, but whatever. It's our show, you know. Prometheus messed a lot of stuff up.
That's one way to put it, yeah.
Oh, that reminds me. I have 2 minor corrections from our Prometheus movie episode. Not corrections, maybe just things I want to clarify. The first is, I know I was pretty fucking hard on that movie. I still enjoy watching it and watch it when I'm watching the whole series. So give me a break, Paul. And the other thing is, I know before the tweets start coming in, I said that Jesse Ventura says, if it bleeds, we can kill it in Predator. That was an Arnold Schwarzenegger line. Jesse Ventura has the line, I ain't got time to bleed. You can understand my confusion. I haven't watched Predator in a very long time. So again, get off my back, internet. I'm not a perfect person. We are not perfect organisms like the Xenomorph. We are flawed. We are not perfect creatures.
Correct. That's how it goes. You know?
All right. Well, now that that's settled once and for all, do you want to jump into this this comic book series, crew Dr. Kenny?
Well, you know, I mean, that's why we're here. So I suppose now would be as good of a time as any.
Sure, yeah. So this is Prometheus Fire and Stone issues 1 through 4 that I keep wanting to call Blood and Stone because of the Mortal Kombat comics I read recently, Blood and Thunder. But this is Fire and Stone. Released September through December 2014 by Dark Horse Comics. I'm just going to give the credits here up top. Written by Paul Tobin. Penciled by Juan Ferreira. I really hope I got that right. Colored by Juan Ferreira and Eduardo Ferreira. Lettered by Nate Picos, with covers by David Palumbo, and in a very exciting twist, a variant cover by one of my favorite artists, Paul Pope. That is actually like one of the leading pages in the trade paperback. I'm very, very excited to see some Paul Pope alien artwork here, man. That guy is just a master. To the point where it might have left me a little disappointed in the artwork in the rest of the book because Paul Pope, not because the artwork's bad, it's very, very good, but Paul Pope didn't draw it. So
he certainly didn't.
That's on me. That's my personal thing. The artwork in this, I think, is very good and very effective overall, and the creature designs, as we'll get into, are top notch in my opinion.
Yeah, they're really good. I like them a lot.
Yes. So before we dive in deeper, I believe it's up to the doctor to give us a little bit of a plot synopsis this week.
Yeah, I believe that's where the coin flip landed on. Yes.
Yeah, right. What do you got? What do you got for us, Doctor?
Over 100 years after the events of Prometheus, a Weyland-Yutani crew arrives to a now terraformed LV-223 to salvage the downed ship. They end up getting more than they bargained for in a variety of ways, including but not limited to weird monkey guys, mutiny, a living engineer, and an insane android rotting from the inside out. Also, this notably marks the first appearance of actual xenomorphs on the show, so hey, there's that.
Can't help but notice you left out the sharks. Didn't really want to mention the sharks, did you there?
I'm not at liberty to divulge whether that was a decision on purpose or not.
What went through your head when you turned that page and you saw the mutated xenomorph looking sharks?
I believe I out loud went, come on, man.
Never thought I'd see a shark in an alien comic. It's pretty fucking sweet, honestly. Like, I was very into that.
I'm not going to pretend it wasn't extremely cool, but come on.
Right. Now you know how I feel when I'm playing Alien Trilogy on my PlayStation with the lights off and still getting afraid of those sprites.
Classic.
So, general thoughts. Did you like this overall, or how did you feel?
Well, how should I phrase this? I think I did. However, a big part of my enjoyment of it was sapped from the fact that it's clearly not really designed to be a standalone book. Like at the ending of it, it doesn't end. It just kind of like stops, you know? Right. And so like when I got to the end of it, I was like, oh, that's it? That's how it ends? Like, okay. But like up until then, I was having a pretty good time. Like the characters that are actually important, I thought were kind of cool. I liked most of the artwork. The plot I thought was like different enough from Alien stuff that I've read before. Like overall, I actually probably thought it was overall pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Dark Horse clearly believed in this. They gave it like the premium hardcover treatment when it was time for the trade to come out. And it was it was a massive book crossed over all of their Alien and Predator books. So they really clearly believed in it. I liked it too. I liked it overall. Unlike you, I kind of was okay with the way it ended, not just because I know that we're going to see the continuing adventures of some of these characters in other Fire and Stone series as we go on, but also I was like, oh, so they're just choosing to kind of end this in a similar way to Prometheus, where we just don't have any answers and a lot of questions. That's thematically connected to the movie, you know?
You got me there.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was kind of fine with it. I don't know if this is going to be a good thing or a bad thing for the show, but I am inclined to give comic book, like media tie-in comic book stuff, a pass a lot of the times for doing weird stuff and wacky stuff. I don't know. I don't hold them, like I don't hold an Alien book up to the same standards I hold like Katsuhiro Otomo's Akira or Watchmen or something like that, right?
I will say it's an interesting choice to be more lenient for like Alien comics than for other parts of the franchise. Right. Considering that if you look at the franchise as a whole, something like 70% of it is comics.
Right.
Like that's most of the franchise that you're willing to just be lenient and give a pass to.
Sure. But like, I don't know. I think when it comes to a comic, I'm more able to just like strap in and enjoy the ride as opposed to take out my magnifying glass or take out my nitpickers and nitpick, I guess, you know, like I did with Prometheus and like I will do with Alien Covenant. Spoiler alert.
All right. Fair enough. All right.
Yeah. And because I mean, they get I think basically what it boils down to is probably similar to like the Star Wars canon, right? Where you've got different authors with different intent focusing on different corners and aspects of the series and getting to like explore and do whatever they want. So I think comics can get a little bit more experimental. As we'll see in this, I think that they took the mythology, the setup of, say, the pathogen from the movie and really kind of ran wild with it in kind of deciding what it does and doesn't do.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so I don't know if I take it as canon, but I certainly enjoy seeing other people interpret Prometheus, the film, and write something based in that universe off of the film without John Spates and Damon Lindelof and Ridley Scott weighing in.
Yeah, because that is something that's interesting to note about this. This is intended to be a sequel to Prometheus, but like at the time, they hadn't really started fully developing what would eventually become the true sequel to Prometheus, Covenant. So this is like, you know, an interesting like take on like, what if like, you know, how should I phrase this? This is the kind of thing that you get when there's like two different groups of people that are like, I want to make a follow-up to that. And it's just interesting to see how two different people, like using the same source material, how and where they decide to spin it off and like what directions they decide to go with it, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of like Night of the Living Dead spinning off into Return of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, right?
You know, there was an example of precisely what I was thinking of in my mind, and I couldn't remember what it was. That's the exact example I was trying to think of, but couldn't remember what the name of it was.
Do you want to say it and act like it was like I can just cut me out saying it?
Nah, it's fine.
And then I'll be like, oh, totally, dude. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, you're such a brain genius, super smart guy to think of that all on your own.
All right. Yeah, I know. Let's Let's jump into this. Let's take a closer look at the pages of this miniseries here. Okay, my first note says absolutely awesome to see a variant cover by Paul Pope. I already addressed that, but it bears repeating. So the first page of this takes place in the year 2090. That's what, 3 years before the Prometheus arrives at LV-223, right?
It's like, since it actually, I believe it specifies that it's in April of that year, it's more like about 3.5 years.
Okay.
And it's about a year after the like opening scene of Prometheus. Well, not the opening scene, but the scene where Holloway and Shaw like find the cave paintings. Okay. It's about a year or so after that.
Gotcha. So it's this little probe, kind of looks like one of the pups, right, that we see in Fifield use in the movie, and we'll see a character in this use to film things. But I mean, I guess the main similarity is that they have a round body, and it's just kind of.
Well, this one does also have a Wayland Industries logo on it as well. So
gotcha, and just straight up Wayland, not Wayland-Yutani.
Well, it's like it's on the front of the probe, but like the shot that you can see it in, you see the probe from the side, so you can only see like the left half of the logo. But since the events of Prometheus, which take place about 3 years after this, since they were still Wayland Industries at that point, I assume this is also a Wayland Industries probe.
It kind of looks like the little space pods that the Saiyans arrive in as babies in Dragon Ball Z. Or I guess as adults. The adults use them too. I guess it looks like the Saiyan pods with dragonfly wings. Anyway, it's just kind of skimming the planet, right? Checking out the atmosphere, all of that kind of stuff, when suddenly it gets smooshed by an engineer foot, and we see this engineer kind of just walking off afterwards. Immediately, I was like, okay, so a couple years before the Prometheus arrives on this planet, there's an engineer out there just kind of banging around, right? Like,
according to this comic, yes.
Why haven't they checked on the ship that didn't launch in the movie and the one guy in hypersleep? Like, something's going on here, you know? Because, like, we're led to believe in Prometheus, it's a barren planet. Even though there are other ships, there's no other engineers around, right?
I mean, as far as, like, based on the information they give us in Prometheus, yeah, as far as I can tell, that's correct.
And I know I said planet. It's a moon. Get off my back, internet. It's going to happen a lot.
One brief little thing that I want to add here is that when that drone is flying in and scanning the planet before it gets crunched, it actually refers to, like, you know, it's talking about how it's like, you know, reporting through the radio that it's scanning the surface of LV-223, which it refers to as one of the moons of the planet Calpamos, or Calpamos, maybe. I don't know how you pronounce it. I've only ever seen it written down, and I looked it up, and this is the first canonical reference to what the name of the planet these moons are around is in.
So it also says, well, the Zeta 2 Reticuli system, we know that. We hear that all the time. But it says it's one of 3 moons, and I was always under the impression that there were 2, but in the original Alien, there was only 1, right? Like, I remember feeling like it was a cop-out that they're like, oh, there's a second moon, right? But whatever. Different sides of the planet or something, I suppose. Different orbit speeds. But this is saying that there's 3 moons.
And what's more, that third moon isn't even named as of, like, right now. If you go onto the internet and look it up, you will discover that third moon still to this day has not ever been given a name at any point in the franchise.
It's something they just, like, were keeping around for a future story in the comics, maybe.
Yeah, I guess.
Kind of like how, like, Lost World, Jurassic Park pulled that Site B nonsense on us.
Yeah.
You know? Which I'm just going to say, it was nonsense.
I mean, I was fine with it when I was watching it, but, like, afterwards, in retrospect, I was like, you know, there was no point anywhere in the movie where they would, like, even imply something like this exists, but whatever.
And then the shit they pulled with Jurassic Park 3, also setting that one on Site B. Like, show us the park, whatever. I'll get mad about that later. I'll save that for our Jurassic Park podcast.
Correct.
Anyway, after that, we fast forward to January 12th, 2219. Aboard the command ship Helios. The command ship Helios is docked on another ship called the Geryon. Geryon. Geryon? How would you pronounce that?
I would probably pronounce it Geryon.
Let's go with Geryon.
And then there's also 2 other ships that are docked with it as well. There's, like you mentioned, the Helios and the Geryon. There's also the Cadmos and the Perseus as well. Right. That's not Perseus, by the way. Perses. There's no U there.
Yeah, the Perseus is a patrol ship, as they put it, and the Cadmos is the salvage ship.
Yep.
And the Helios here is the command ship. And these are all docked on a larger ship called the Geryon, which is under the command of Captain Angela Foster.
Yep, that's the one.
One of our main characters in this series. But before we meet her, we actually meet her through the lens of space documentarian Clara Atkinson.
Yep.
She's just kind of like walking around the ship with her documentary camera pups, like introducing us to the major players. So I'm going to run through those real quick. Captain Angela Foster, she's head of this mission, this salvage mission to LV-223, or so she says. There's ship doctor James Weddell, who is Clara's boyfriend or husband or something. I'm not really sure.
Which we only figure out because they have some extremely sexually charged dialogue during, like, the first shot we see him in.
Yeah, and they die in each other's arms at the end of the...
They certainly do.
We also meet Francis Lane, an astrobiologist, and he is friends with the ship Synthetic, and he secretly has cancer, something the rest of the crew doesn't know about. I'm just going to spoil that here.
Oh, don't forget. He also is qualified. He has, like, the qualifications to repair synths as well. Which he signifies is important, but never actually comes up.
Sure, he actually does the opposite of that in this book. Speaking of synthetics and friends of Francis, we have our synthetic.
We certainly do.
Eldon, the ship's synthetic.
Make sure to make a note of it. You said you were going to write down every time when new one comes up.
I do have an Android roll call spreadsheet. I've got it all filled out up through Eldon, and if we happen across ones that share, because like maybe they did an E a long time ago, you know? Maybe they did a D a long time ago and something we're going to read. We can just keep filling those in under the in the rows. Yeah, I am keeping track. So far we have a consistent A through E, a bunch of spaces, and then a W for Walter. We already knew. I mean, that's looking ahead, but hey.
Well, yeah. There's actually still one final major character beyond that.
Yeah.
Chief Security Officer Galgo Helder, which, wow, what a name.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. I got a good feeling about this guy.
I think me too. I saw him and I was like, oh, he's cool and totally trustworthy. Wink.
And the way he was talking, telling stories on the ship, you know, just holding court, being a mouthy, tough guy.
But beyond that, there's also a whole bunch of other characters who a lot of them were given names, but most of them don't end up really mattering because they either get killed or we don't see them more than like once or twice. So whatever.
Yeah. Well, some of these names will pop up as we talk about this, but we're not going to name all of them. There's like 30 fucking people in this thing.
There's a lot. That's for sure. Speaking of names, though, however, there is one thing that I hope you're okay with it if I just kind of like go off for a minute.
Please go off.
All right. As you mentioned earlier, the 4 ships are named the Helios, the Geryon, the Cadmos, and the Perseus.
Yes.
You mentioned during one of the 2 Prometheus episodes, I don't remember which one, that you're not super familiar with Greek mythology.
Right.
So this is what I kind of wanted to go off about for a second. Just like Prometheus, all 4 of those ships are named after something from Greek myth.
Okay.
And so I figured that was just like a nice little tie-in because it's like, we had the Prometheus, and now we have more ships that are named after something from Greek mythology. So I figured I'd butt in to let you know what they are to kind of like, you know, enrich the tapestry of the story, so to speak.
Sure, yeah. I love to learn things.
We'll just start at the beginning then with the Helios. Helios is some places define him as a titan, but most places just refer to him as a god. But he's most notable for being the god of the sun. Just like every single god in Greek mythology, he had like 85 kids and was involved in a wide variety of stories. But like thematically, the most important part about Helios is that he's the god of the sun.
Okay, gotcha.
The Geryon, as they even mentioned in the comic, they call him, like in the comic, they refer to Geryon as the son of Medusa, but in the actual mythological stories, he's the grandson of Medusa.
Okay.
But even in the comic, they mention that he has 3 heads and 1 body, but in the stories...
sense.
In the stories, he has one of 3 configurations. He's either 3 heads with 1 body, he's 3 bodies with 1 head, or he has 3 of both. So,
I was so fucking hoping you would say 3 bodies with 1 head.
Yeah, like, he can have 3 of one, or he can have 3 of one of them and 1 of the other, or switch them, or he can just have 3 of both, but still be 1 creature. I mean, the stories differ, but yeah, that's the general gist of him. Basically, he's a big, giant, humanoid-looking guy, usually depicted with multiple heads is what he looks like.
And that's why he's got 3 smaller ships docked to him. Those are
that is correct, yes.
Man, it's kids, pay attention. I'm gonna file our podcast under educational as well, because holy shit, we are learning.
The third ship, Cadmos, is...
That's the guy from God of War, right?
That's Kratos. Nice try.
No, but, Kratos is the guy from Mortal Kombat.
He is also a character from Mortal Kombat, yes.
Okay.
But
these are jokes, kids.
But Cadmos, they spell it here Kadmos, but that is a transliteration of the characters, or of the person's, like, his name is usually spelled Cadmus, Cadmus.
Okay. Cadmus, of course. Like in DC Comics.
Correct. And Cadmus is generally considered to be like, how like in Greco-Roman epic poetry and stuff, they would have like a whole series of like epic ancient Greek heroes that everyone would tell stories about. Well, Cadmus was the first one of those. He is famous, like he's most famous for being the first epic Greek hero, and he is also mythologically and historically considered to be the founder of the city of Thebes.
Holy moly.
And
we don't see that ship do much, do we, in this? We see the Perseus and the Helios. Those are the ones that touch down, right?
The Cadmos is the one that comes in, like, the Cadmos is the one that gets called near the end, after Galgo runs off with those other 2 dudes and they need to bring in another ship. The Cadmos is the one that they call, like, near the end of the 4th issue. I believe that's really the only thing of note it ever really does in the storyline.
Gotcha.
But anyway, like I was saying, and finally, the Perseus. This was a little bit harder because there actually is a Titan in Greek mythology named Perseus, but he wasn't really that significant or meaningful and didn't really do anything. Like, his most famous claim to fame is that he's the father of Hecate, who is the goddess of magic in Greek mythology.
Okay. Hecate or Hecate?
However you want to pronounce it, yeah.
That's how they say it in Goddess Hecate is what they say in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
But yes, her.
Okay. Gotcha.
Because of the references in the other ships to the Geryon and to Cadmus, I'm assuming that the ship being named Perseus isn't a reference to the Titan Perseus. I'm guessing it's probably a reference to Perseus.
Sure.
Who, like, the reason that's significant is because, for anyone out there that doesn't know, Perseus's big claim to fame is that he killed Medusa. So,
man, and now he sits on her son's head, or her grandson's head, depending on the translation.
But it's funny, though, because, like, while I was reading up on this and taking these notes and making sure I got all my information correct, I got curious as to, because, like, as we were discussing earlier, the planet is named Kalpamos, and this is like the first time it's ever been used in like a canonical alien thing.
Sure.
It is believed, like the name Kalpamos, it's believed to have been created as like a fan name unofficially, but in like I don't remember when the book came out, but the Colonial Marines Technical Manual used the name Kalpamos in it, and that was the first time it ever appeared in any kind of like alien franchise media officially. But then they decided to use it in this comic, and this is like when it solidified and became canonically known. That's what its name is now.
Okay, that's kind of fun. I like when that fan stuff does kind of bleed into and become a adapted canon, even if it's extended canon and not like hardcore film canon, because the next Alien movie could rename the planet, and then that rename thing is going to stick because the movies are canon, right?
Yeah,
that's the official. Whatever the movies, it's kind of like why Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of suck because the movies took precedent over whatever they did on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Just a fun little factoid for you, how we were discussing a couple of weeks ago the original Prometheus script called Alien Engineers. In that script, this planet was called Epsilon.
Okay.
I wasn't really going anywhere else with that. I just thought that was a fun little factoid. But
that does feel like the name of something they'd put in a file when they don't have a real name, where they're like, well, we found the Starfish system, we're just going to name it the Zeta 2 Reticuli planets Alpha, Beta, Epsilon, whatever. That's like some bureaucratic bullshit.
But I did have one or two other little factoids about my researching like mythological names and stuff. So I got curious as to what kind of myth connection the planet name of Kalpamos had. Yes. And so I searched around for a while and I finally came across the answer. And the answer is there isn't one. It's not from any like Greek myths or anything at all. When I was searching around for it, the only two like results that I got were websites about the Alien franchise that mentioned this planet. And there's some Dutch guy that's been making homemade loudspeakers for something like 40 years.
Holy
and
shit,
over the course of that 40 years, he's made dozens of different like types of speaker models, and one of them happened to be named the Kalpamos, and like he has a whole list on his website of like all of the discontinued models he no longer makes, and that's just one of them. Finally, the last little factoid that I came across that I thought was interesting, that you would probably also find interesting, is I came across the Xenopedia article for Kalpamos. I also came across the Alien Anthology Wiki fandom article for Kalpamos. And as you may imagine, those two are almost word for word, nearly identical to each other. There's one difference. The only difference is that one of them cites Kalpamos as the fourth planet in its star system, and the other one says that it's the fifth planet. That is the only difference in them.
Well, if it was once categorized as, you said, Epsilon, would make sense it's actually the fifth, right?
It certainly would. However, in one of the movies, I don't remember which one, but in one of the movies, they refer to the planet as Zeta 2 Reticuli IV. So in the movies, it's canonically the fourth planet in the system.
So maybe the sun in this system is Alpha. Makes sense to me. Well, you know what? We're going to have to write James Cameron and figure it out.
We certainly will. Demand he answer us.
He's the guy who knows what's up.
I think that was really all I had to say about all that, though.
Okay.
It's just, I saw that and I was like, hey, I recognize some of these names. And then I just kind of like got down a rabbit hole of searching for stuff. And, I don't know. I just figured you might find that, you or the listeners, I guess. There are other people listening to this. Somebody out there is probably going to find this stuff.
I think it's cool. I mean, clearly someone took the Prometheus aspect, the name Prometheus specifically, and ran with it to keep this thematically connected. I like that, honestly.
I mean, after all, this ship was sent out by I think it was actually sent out by Weyland-Yutani. I think by the time this comic takes place, it is Weyland-Yutani and not just Weyland, I believe.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, let's start tearing through this thing, man. I want to get to the meat of this. I want to get to the action. I want to get to the monsters.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got this gang of the salvage crew and the security team, and they are launching down to the surface of LV-223 in the Perseus. Let's see here. Angela Foster, captain, and the science nerds, I think, land in the Helios, while Galgo and the security team land on the Perseus.
Mm-hmm.
And they're expecting to find what we saw in Prometheus, right? This kind of barren desert moon.
They certainly were expecting that, that's for sure.
But that's not what they find at all. They find like a blossoming, like blooming jungle with like mutated like primates and monkeys in it and stuff. And they're just kind of going through this jungle. There's like 30 of them in a line, like traveling through this landscape, through this jungle, across these like rock bridges over lakes of water. And like the planet doesn't look anything like it did in Prometheus, right?
It certainly doesn't. No, like if they hadn't said it was 223, I would not have known it was 223.
Yeah, we would have thought it was that third moon we didn't know about until this book.
That's right. Like 893 or whatever its number is. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's like to the point where they're like, are we sure we landed on the right moon? You know?
Yeah.
Because this is nothing like we were expecting. Like, there's ants, right? They find like these two tribes of ants that are clearly mutated and looking kind of xenomorphy, if I may say so, just going to town on each other.
Well, one of them looks sort of xenomorphy. The other one kind of looks engineer-y.
Yeah, it's interesting. And they are just ripping each other's heads off, these tiny little ants. They scoop some up for samples. Like we said, there are these gross-looking monkeys swinging around.
Those monkeys are so cool. I described them in my notes as very cool, skeletonized, inside-out monkeys is how I described them.
It's like the ghost monkey in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, like cranked up to 11.
It's weird because like the monkeys themselves, like externally, they kind of look a little bit like the engineers' flight suits, except there's these big gaps all over like the chest area where you can just kind of like see their internal organs. It's very cool.
Yeah, man. It's unsettling for me.
I love those monkeys so much. Sure. Those guys were so cool.
The other thing they find is these little pools of black goo, like this pearlescent black. The one of them, I think Galgo, is like, holy shit, we struck oil. And Francis is like, man, Francis, the astrobiologist, is like, no, it's not. It's something else, man. This thing has weird properties. Like, he's automatically, like, obsessed with the black goo.
Yeah.
And as we know, he's hiding a little secret from the rest of the crew, which is he's dying from cancer and no treatment has worked so far. And the only person who knows this is Eldon, like, outside of Francis, right?
Yeah, Eldon the Synth. The two of them are best friends.
BFFs.
Which becomes relevant in, like, next issue.
Yeah, man.
I mean, I was operating under the assumption that those puddles of black goo were just like pathogen, just like sitting out in the open.
Yeah.
But like they never really clarify that either way. I just kind of assumed that's what it was because it's like we're talking about Prometheus and there's black goo, you know. But I don't know. They never, like I said, they never go into it. So
sure they don't, but it's pretty clearly supposed to be the pathogen, right? Like it is.
Yeah.
I mean.
It just certainly is.
It raises some questions about that.
Yeah, it's just kind of like sitting out, chilling out in the open. Who knows?
Is it manufactured? Is it naturally occurring? Is there like a vein of black goo that goes through this moon? Who knows, dude? But as they travel through this jungle, they find the wreckage of a ship. But it's not the Prometheus, and it's not the Juggernaut that crashed at the end of Prometheus. It is a lifeboat from the Onager. A lifeboat.
The Onager, yeah.
Called the Onager, pardon me. Which apparently launched from LV-426, the neighboring moon, where the Hadley's Hope colony was recently in this timeline, but hasn't yet happened in our podcast, overrun by xenomorphs.
Yeah, I believe by this point 426 had already had its name changed to Acheron, which whoever made that choice, real like bad portent name to choose, I must confess. But
yeah, man, if I remember correctly, they just straight up call it Acheron in, was it River of Pain?
It was,
I think Newt's Tale also.
Don't remember which one it was.
Sea of Sorrows.
Yeah.
No, Sea of Sorrows is the third one in that trilogy.
Yeah, Sea of Sorrows is the third one. I think it was a River of Pain. I don't remember for sure, though. I'd have to read it again.
Yeah, Acheron. They also call it Acheron in the Xbox 360 Aliens vs. Predator game. They mention it. There's a thing that they do in all of these things where they find any way they can to reference that one specific movie, like...
Yeah, like even though Alien is like the iconic one that started the franchise, Aliens is always the one that every other spin-off project always gets tied into.
Yeah, to the point where we're going to have to limit and spread that stuff out when we get to that area of our movie watching journey, or else we'll just be stuck at Aliens for 2 years.
Yeah, so no thanks.
Yeah.
But the reason this is significant is because, like you said, that they came across the ship, the Onager, and they also get some salvage readings, which, that's how they find the ship, is they have the little radar thing, and it points out salvage readings. And this issue ends on a big cliffhanger as they're reaching towards the door to open it. And then we see on the other side of the door, surprise, surprise, there's like a dozen xenomorphs just like hanging out, chilling directly on the other side of the door.
Fully matured, fully grown xenomorphs. Just right there in our Prometheus
Which,
comic.
Again, like, I know that this has already been said twice over the course of this episode, but I cannot stress how we've finally hit a product that has actual xenomorphs. The 4th episode of the show, and it is a spin-off sequel comic that I believe is currently out of print. It is the first thing we ever cover on the show that actually has real ass classic xenomorphs in it.
It is so out of print. I doubt this will get back in print, right? Like,
I can't like, unless it gets printed in like one of those like big huge we're printing every comic omnibus volumes or something.
Sure.
But otherwise I don't see that ever getting reprinted again.
I feel like the Prometheus books are the last thing on their list. They're going to kind of be like, I don't know, man. Like, do we... Yeah. There's got to be some weird rights issues with these, and I just don't think we want to work that out right now. But that's what happens when one corporation buys up all the other corporations.
Yeah, pretty much.
And that's why we're doing this podcast, to share the story of Prometheus, Fire and Stone with all the other Xeno dorks out there.
That's right. That is specifically the reason we're doing the show. And now that we're done after this episode, we're never doing another one. We've solved the purpose,
End of the podcast.
That's right.
Rate us and review us 5 stars.
Speaking of issue 2, though, that issue ended in a classic, like, surprising way of a bunch of xenomorphs pop up.
Yeah, man.
2 starts off in an equally surprising way with the first line of dialogue referencing ionized farts, whatever those are. It is quite the first line of dialogue.
First line of dialogue in the second.
Yeah, that is quite a first line of dialogue to have in an Alien comic. Well, a Prometheus comic, but you know what I mean.
My note says, fucking stupidly, the crew opens the ship and xenomorph chaos ensues. We got the whole shebang, dude. There's face huggers lashing onto people. There's warriors eating heads off. I mean, it is a bloodbath in here.
Oh, yeah, it rules. I loved it.
Full on alien chaos, man. But somehow, despite a dozen of these, more, I think, the crew manages to retreat and starts heading back to the Helios, and they are not getting chased by Xenos.
Well, they will be sooner or later, but as of this moment, they're not. But it's also significant, though, is that there's a very brief scene during that scene where everyone's getting, like, killed. They do a very brief cutaway of Eldon and Francis going off, like, somewhere. Right. We don't know where yet, and they're, like, not checking in with the rest of the group, which my notes here say, which I'm assuming means something bad is going to happen, which it does.
Well, I mean, Francis is on his own mission, right? He's trying to find something out here. I don't know what made him think he would find it, like, but he's desperate, right? He's just desperate for something. He found this black goo in the jungle, and he's thinking, like, maybe this is the answer. I'll try anything at this point. But, like, maybe he's just out there, like, eating weird alien mushrooms and God knows what, just trying to cure his cancer, you know?
Yeah, who knows? But, like, it's the way it's framed is it's implied that, like, none of the other members of the group know he's doing this. Because, like, I know that none of the other members of the group know he's sick. But the way it's framed, I inferred that they also, like, nobody even knows where he is or what he's doing, much less why, you know?
Yeah, they don't know and they don't care because they're running for their lives now, right? So they're making their way. They're making their way back through everything, and they get to this rock bridge over this lake, right?
Which, by the way, side note, because I've been trying to keep notes on like how many things there are, like I specifically went out of my way to count. In the Onager, I could see a dozen xenomorphs, et cetera, et cetera. The wide shot of the party while they're going across this ledge, I counted 14 people in the panel, just for the record.
Gotcha. And part of this rock bridge just crumbles and a couple people fall in the water. And I'm sorry, this is just the coolest fucking thing I've seen in an alien book, I think, dude. Like this is a thing I didn't know that I wanted to see until I saw it. There are gigantic mutated sharks in this lake.
There certainly are.
So you pointed out to me that they are referred to as deacon sharks, right? They are kind of a deaconized, well, shark, I guess.
I don't know if they're necessarily referred to as deacon sharks, but like, because I guess you could call them xenomorph sharks, but they don't really look like xenomorphs because like this comic has actual xenomorphs in it, you know?
Yeah.
And like these sharks don't have a second mouth like xenomorphs do. They have like the distended, like pop out gum line mouth that the deacon has at the end of the movie, and these sharks have that too. They even still have like the same conical to a point head on them, so like you could call them xenomorph sharks, but technically I suppose you could say that they're more accurately deaconized sharks.
They are. So, they have been deaconized, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Gigantic motherfuckers too. I guess they're not too much larger. They're not like meg sized, but they're pretty fucking big.
Oh, they're real big, and there's at least 4 of them. So
yeah, dude. And they are after these boys who fell in the water. Security officers are trying to shoot into the water to like churn it and drive the sharks away. Do they rescue the dudes who fell in, or they just get straight up eaten, don't they? At least one of them does.
One of them directly does get eaten. One of them might get mauled up, but I know that for sure they pull at least one person. Like there is a panel where you physically see them pulling one person out, and I believe later dialogue implies they rescued at least one more person, but I believe a total of 4 people fell off the ledge. One of them got eaten for sure, so they rescued a maximum of 3 people. So
gotcha. But they get out of there and they just kind of hightail it back to the Helios, right?
They do, and then when they get there, the entire, assorted crew gets even more pissed off when Captain Angela just straight up tells them that the reason she led them here was a lie, and there's actually a real secret reason that she brought them all here.
Yeah, man. She's chasing ghosts.
Yeah, she became obsessed with Peter Whalen's mission, and when she found out that he disappeared here, she decided she was going to come here and find the ship and figure out what happened to him, and she thought that, even though he disappeared here and never came back, that probably was a good thing and that it was worth tracking down and finishing the equation, I guess. So here we are.
Yeah, I guess the official story is that Peter Whalen died on Earth prior to the Prometheus mission. But the truth is, he's, as we all saw, laying dead inside a juggernaut on LV-223. And She came out here to finish his mission, find his discovery.
And like a whole bunch of people get pissed off at her about how they're like, oh, so there isn't even like an actual ship to like salvage and stuff. And she's like, well, hold on, there actually is. We actually did come out here to salvage a ship. The only thing that I lied to you about was specifically what ship it is we came out here to salvage. And everyone was basically like, come on, that doesn't count and you know it.
I don't know, man. Like that, like salvaging the Prometheus would be a pretty big deal contract, right? Like
it was $1 trillion ship.
Not only that, but like the company is going to want to keep the truth about what happened under wraps and everything, right? Like,
like the Wayland Corporation will want information from the ship that Peter Wayland died on, you know?
I'm personally shocked that it took them 100 years to launch a like a salvage mission. Honestly, like I feel like they would be on it immediately. You know, like in my favorite movie Sunshine that I like to bring up on this podcast.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, especially because in the previous episode we established that they're only 39 light years away from Earth, so it shouldn't have taken them 100 years to get here. It should have taken them at most 80 to get here.
Yeah, man. Like in Sunshine. The first mission,
just like in Sunshine,
the first mission to reignite the sun was a ship called the Icarus, and when they lost contact with the Icarus, they immediately launched their backup ship, the Icarus 2, because they're like, we're not waiting around. We gotta get this taken care of. Like the Prometheus 2 should have been like fueled up and ready to go. You know, it's like we learn in Armageddon, right? NASA backs up on everything, right? 2 ships.
That's right.
Yeah, man. So yeah, everyone's mad about the truth of the mission, but whatever, they'll get over it. Meanwhile, our boys Francis and Eldon have found their way into a cave.
They certainly have, yeah.
It's like a cave inside a mountain. I don't know that we ever got a clear shot of the mountain, but we see this cave quite a bit. And they've gotten back in contact with the crew, giving them a coordinates to where they are, and they're telling them about like this cave that they found, where it seems like one of the survivors from that Onager crash must have been living here, and they were like researching into the pathogen. They were also surveying the planet. The survivor's name was actually Derek Russell. They found a whole bunch of like notes about this black goo that we obviously know is the pathogen, but throughout the comic they consistently refer to as the accelerant. Right.
But the other thing they find is that they find a probe that he'd been using to like scan the moon, and somehow after all this time the probe is still active and on and working.
Yes, and he's produced a scan of a juggernaut of a engineer ship, and Francis is like, this is proof that there's intelligent life here somewhere, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So turns out Peter Wayland was right all along. So now it's time to mount like a rescue mission.
Correct.
Francis also sort of figured out that the black goo that's spilled everywhere, the pathogen, leaked out of this crashed juggernaut ship that he's found the scan of. So over the course of a century, this jungle and all of this life has sprouted up as a result of basically an ecological disaster caused by Captain Yannick crashing the juggernaut.
I was literally waiting for you to finish that sentence so I could interject how I even have written in my notes, which means this entire story is Yannick's fault. And then you
100% it is. Best character in Prometheus.
That's right.
I'm just going to say it now. Like Yannick's the best character in Prometheus. I've changed my mind.
He was my favorite, that's for sure.
So now they're trying to launch. So the team's trying to launch a recovery team. They re-enter the jungle. We see our first shot of the engineer in this Prometheus story. He's just kind of in the jungle, checking everything out, surrounded by deacon monkeys, right?
Yeah, he's just kind of like staring menacingly at them from the shadows. And it's funny, too, because I believe the cover for this issue is like, you know, an engineer standing there in like a rough-hewn doorway out from stone while a couple other humanoid characters are like, you know, get scared of him. And so when I saw that image of the engineer standing there, I thought that was the end of this issue. So in my notes, I literally like did a line break and then wrote issue 3 and then kept scrolling when, oh no, that wasn't the end of issue 2. Oh no, and I had to go back and delete it.
Yeah, so he's just kind of standing in the jungle and like they're commenting like there's all kinds of dangerous stuff in this jungle, so keep your eyes out, everybody. Totally missing the 8-foot tall Vitruvian man in the body armor, you know?
Yeah, as they're heading through the jungle, somebody, I believe it's Captain Angela, says basically, you know, keep your head on a swivel, make sure to watch out and keep eyes on everything to the Helios.
Yes. Yep.
And then the guards at the Helios are like, oh, we definitely will, no worries, over and out, and then turn off their comms, and then like 5 seconds later get attacked by like half a dozen Xenomorphs.
Xenomorph's tail stabs right through one of them. Yeah, man, Helios is under attack now. Meanwhile, we spend some time with Francis and Eldon in the cave. We see some empty Xenomorph eggs in there, which is kind of cool. And Francis is going through this research and he's getting desperate. He's like, man, this is an accelerant. It heightens aggression, but it also like enhances, you know, and evolves life forms and all this kind of stuff.
I believe the specific phrasing he used is that it boosts healing properties, but causes aggression and like violent deformities. I don't remember the exact phrasing of it, but yeah, it gives you aggression and deformities, but also heals you better. So
yeah. And it could change the universe. So he's reading Russell's research in these journals that Russell was keeping, and he thinks it's somehow possible to filter the accelerant and mellow the aggression. And he's like, maybe we could run it through a synthetic human's like ecosystem.
And at this point in my notes, I literally wrote, wonder why they would bring that up. With like 15 question marks after it.
He just happens to be hanging out with his BFF Eldon. Eldon's distracted though because he's recognizing that there is no seismic activity on this moon, but that this mountain somehow keeps getting bigger. I guess he can sense it on like a very small level that the size is changing.
Now, he does mention that. And in this 4-issue arc, that doesn't go anywhere, and it's never followed up on. However...
Yeah, it doesn't go anywhere in this, but I have to talk about this anyway. This is the most insane thing I've ever seen in my fucking life. So, I mentioned earlier, I was expecting deacons in this, right? You see a Prometheus comic, you think deacons. Deacons were planned to be a part of this whole crossover, but they were cut by 20th Century Fox, replaced with Xenomorphs, etc. But that just got me curious about the Deacon himself. So I popped over to our friendly neighborhood Xenopedia and started reading. There is a theory that the mountain that Francis and Eldon are in this, that is growing, this biological mountain, is the Deacon.
What?
I know. It's a theory. Right? That somehow the Deacon kept mutating and growing and grew into this thing. But in this Xenopedia article about the Deacon, all about the development, why it was named this, because Ridley Scott thought its head shape looked like the hat that a Catholic deacon would wear or something like that.
Sure.
If you go down to appearances in other media, right? Or just appearances in general, there are 3 entries. Appearances: Prometheus, aliens, fire and stone, parentheses, possibly as a mountain. And Prometheus, fire and stone, Omega, parentheses, possibly as a mountain. So there is a theory out there that this very mountain is the creature that we saw burst out of the last engineer in Prometheus, who somehow grew gigantic.
I am curious to read the rest of Fire and Stone, if only to figure out how they possibly actually posit that theory in the pages of the comic.
And the fact that they're like, it's possible. It has strong fan theory energy for me, but maybe there is something that connects them directly.
Yeah, the fact that it says possibly in the description leads me to believe that it's not like for sure definitively, like maybe someone just guessed, or so. Like, again, we'd have to read the rest of the comic arc to figure it out.
Right. And we will be covering Aliens, Fire, and Stone, so we will get a... Maybe the evidence is in that one more specifically. But just in case it's not, I had to say something now because I... possibly as a mountain.
It's yeah. Now there's a name right there. If I've ever heard one. If anyone out there needs a new Twitter display name, there you go.
There you go. Anyway,
but we follow this up in the comic with, like I said, that weird mention in the plot that never gets followed up on at any point in this part of the arc. Yeah. But while that's happening, the rescue party that's searching for Francis and Eldon find what I believe is the downed Juggernaut that got crashed at the end of Prometheus. I'm pretty sure that's the one.
It is presented to us as if it is that crashed
and then
Juggernaut.
When they go in, Galgo just finds this big, huge, wicked-looking, awesome two-handed engineer rifle, which I was like, all right, sure. I mean, I don't think we'd ever seen anything like that in the movie. There was no hint that anything like that existed, but he picked it up and I was like, looks pretty sweet. I'll allow it.
Sure. Engineers got guns, whatever.
That's right.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. They just take a little detour into that ship and then they leave again. And we cut over to Francis, who has injected the pathogen into Eldon. Again, thinking the synthetics biological system will filter it, and
that is not what happens.
Obviously, it was so fucking funny when he was like, just a little drop, that's all, not gonna. But then
he does the entire thing,
the entire syringe. One drop probably would have fucked things up, right? But B, shoots him up like crazy. It's fucking nuts, and Eldon immediately starts just going haywire, right?
Yeah, he starts losing his mind. He very clearly becomes infected the way that Engineer Head in Prometheus looked like, where you could see black veins through him, and one of his eyes turns black, and he goes crazy. And I should note that this actually is the end of issue 2. I thought the first appearance of the Engineer was, but no, this actually is where the issue ends.
It is, yes. So from here, we catch up later on, not very much later on, but a little later on, with Francis running through the jungle and Eldon chasing him and catching up to him.
And Eldon has basically gone full Terminator by this point. His skin is basically gone, the robotic endoskeleton underneath, but he still has the weird butt plug looking balls all over him and everything. And his skin isn't fully off; it's still in the process of sloughing off, in the middle of it and everything.
Yeah,
but he's chasing Francis through the woods, through the jungle rather, towards the rest of the rescue party.
He rips more of his skin off, and I guess while he's distracted pulling more of his face skin off, Francis does get away. Meanwhile, back on the Helios, their ship, the outside of their ship, is just getting covered in xenomorphs.
There's at least 6 of them now, but more of them show up in very short order.
Yeah, man. So, change of plans, right? They got to lock down the ship, and the crew's got to get back there to help them out. Fortunately... Hold on, I'm a little turned around on events. They haven't caught Francis yet, have they?
No, not yet. So basically, just very, very quickly, Eldon is chasing Francis through the jungle, and Francis is running towards the direction of the rescue party, but has not met them yet. It cuts over to the Helios. We find out it's being covered in xenomorphs. But also there was one thing we forgot to mention. There's a brief scene where we see the rescue party, and we find out that one of them, inside of their bag, they stuffed one of the canisters of pathogen and just have it with them now, which, even in my notes I wrote, yet another thing I'm sure is going to work out great and totally not bite them in the ass later.
Hopefully not. So the Helios is covered with aliens, and Captain Angela says, change the plans. We got to get back to the Helios and help out. Helios needs to lock down, shutters, protective shutters, shields, all of that kind of stuff. rescue team starts running through the jungle when our boy Galgo gets absolutely decked in the face by one of these monkeys.
Yeah, and the little monkey guy just slashes him right in the face, and he gets
right
a
across the
very,
face.
very cool Squall Lionheart from Final Fantasy VIII scar right over the bridge of his nose between his eyes.
Or, because I'm mandated to do this in every episode, a scar like Omar from The Wire.
There you go.
But I don't know. He seems fine, I guess, despite his face cut open and gushing blood.
Yeah, he's got blood all over him, but otherwise he's basically just like, we need to keep going. But like at this point is when they, on their little, motion sensor, they notice someone rushing towards them. They look up through the jungle and Francis shows up. This is when they meet up with Francis.
Francis shows up and is immediately put under arrest by Angela when he tells them.
I laughed out loud. Like, I don't want to say it was like a plot twist, but when that happened, I was like, that is the most absurd thing that could have happened at this precise moment in the comic.
Yeah, man. She just immediately, he's like, Eldon's crazy. He's trying to kill me because I injected some of that goo in him. And she's like, well, you're under arrest. That was a member of our crew and also property. It's just this weird, like, this is why the Matrix happened eventually, right? Like, this is why.
I actually have specifically written down, he is arrested for, quote, injecting unknown substances into the crew during the middle of an alien war. And the actual charge he gets is, quote, Title 18, Section 1115 of the Wayland Yutani Corporate Criminal Code, misconduct of ship officers.
Jesus
Francis,
Christ.
of course, claims it's fine because he's a synth, which means he's basically just a thing. Whereas Angela's like, no, bitch, he's a crew member. What are you talking about?
Yeah, man. But he's going to bitch about it the rest of the time he's in this comic book. He's like, it's just a robot. Yeah. It's just a fucking robot. I hate robots. It's like such a turn from him, like early in the book being like, you're my BFF, Eldon. You're the only person I trust, etc. Right? He's like, really taking a turn.
I have to assume him liking and getting along with Eldon was intended to be a mask from the beginning, but who knows?
Yeah, or is he now suddenly like obsessed with self-preservation? So he's like,
I don't know,
just a coward, Who knows?
But they find him, they arrest him. He gets all whiny and like doesn't stop complaining about it, like you said, for the rest of the comic. But they load him up and take him with them, and they get back to the ship. And how they originally said there were 6 on the ship, well, now there's at least 24 of them, which, if my math is correct, is more than the 6 they originally thought.
It's also more than you counted in the lifeboat from LV-426, whose name I can't recall. So do you think that there were just more of them packed in there than we saw, or do you think there are other xenomorphs already on the planet?
I don't know, man. Like, I genuinely don't know.
We did see the 2 or 3 empty eggs in the cave. Plus we saw, like, we didn't touch on this, but there was like a killing field where there were just bodies of like large mutated animals when they were going through the jungle. So
has that happened yet?
Yeah, that was in their initial exploration. We saw that. Maybe we see it again later. But like maybe like clearly there were xenomorphs here already that weren't trapped in that ship. They just so there must have been some banging around on this planet.
Yeah, there had to have been. That's like I mean, put on the spot like this right now while I'm trying to think of it, I can't really think of any other explanation off the top of my head. So yeah, sure, it sounds as good as anything else.
Yeah. So they're like, oh shit, there's way more of these things than we thought. We got to get to the Perseus. Galgo, go to the Perseus. We can use the weapons on that to drive these things away so that, like, before they break into the Helios, and we can all get the fuck out of here, right?
There is one moment here that I would like to kind of go in on just a little bit, all right?
Sure.
Galgo has a quip during that scene where he talks about his college days, and he lists that there was only 2 things he was good at in college. And those 2 things are drinking beer and pretending not to be the father. And I was
wow, that is in this book, isn't it? Holy shit.
I was sitting there and I was like, I don't know if that's the kind of characterization you want to give this guy if you like, I don't know, expect the audience to sympathize with him, because at the time I thought he was still intended to be a sympathetic character. Later on in the book, it turns out, no, we're not supposed to sympathize him. We're supposed to not like him. We're supposed to hate him. And so that line probably is an early indicator that we're supposed to hate him. But at the time, I didn't know that, and I was like, why would you put that in this book?
Man, well, he was introduced talking about like some kind of a virtual strip club he was going to with his buddies. Yep. Like, he's just clearly scumbag central as the book presents it. Not that I'm not saying people go to strip clubs. Like, you can go to strip clubs and not be a scumbag. People do it all the time. But this is the kind of guy who's like a regular there every week, you know, every night kind of guy. One of those guys, you know? Yeah, man. What a fucking... I got a good feeling about him. I think he's really going to pull through at the end of this story, though.
But there's the next scene after this. Well, actually, the next scene after that is the one where we see Francis whining and complaining about getting arrested. And my notes is just, you fucked up, dude. Accept it. But the scene after that is the one I thought was cool.
The Lord of the Rings scene.
That's right. It's just like in Lord of the Rings. Galgo is like crouched below a pathway in the jungle, and he's like in a little ditch underneath or whatever, and he sees the engineer like walk by, and in his hands he's very clearly holding what is a like curved blade dagger. But then as the panels go on, he's actually holding a xenomorph tail, and then we find out that the tail is still connected to a xenomorph, and that xenomorph is dead.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so cool. He like drags it across this pathway to like a pile of other dead xenomorph corpses, which I thought was so cool, because it's like you never see a whole intact xenomorph.
No way.
If they're dead, it's because they get burned or blown apart or shot up. And it's did he like beat these things to death with his bare hands? Or like, we never figure out how these guys are dead. He's just piling up their corpses. And I'm like, damn, this guy is badass.
That was a very, very cool scene. That was easily my favorite part of this book was this moment right here. Yeah, just to see an engineer dragging a corpse of a Xeno and throwing it on a pile of like, I don't know what's here, man, 15 to 20 other dead Xenos that he's presumably killed. Like,
I could make out at least 10 individual ones, but the way it's drawn is it's clear there are more beyond that you just can't see. So
yeah, man. Just, badass introduction.
Yeah, it rules.
Engineers are not ones to fuck with in this comic book universe, clearly.
Yeah, it was awesome, and I loved it.
He's not even phased. He's like just chill and composed doing this, too.
Oh, yeah.
But this scares the shit out of Galgo, and he runs after his other two security grunts, Piper and Higgins, who are escorting Francis, right?
Yep.
And he's like, hey, guys, wait up. Things are looking bad, right? Might be a change of plans for us. Meanwhile, back in the Helios, Eldon, still with skin falling off of him, is just walking up to the ship with the xenomorphs, and because he's a crew member, he's able to just go right inside.
Because earlier when they locked down the Helios, they said every door on the ship has to be closed, and it has to be closed with like a security code lock so that only crew members can open or close the door. Well, look at that. Eldon's a crew member, so he knows the security codes. So he just walks up and boop, 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 opens the doors. He even's like talking to the xenomorphs. He's like, hey, you guys want to get in here? I want you guys to get in here too. Don't worry, I'll open the doors for you. And everyone's like, oh my god.
Cargo bays open. Eldon with a bunch of his xenomorph buddies just stroll right on in, and he introduces himself. Hello, my name is Eldon. It's good to see you. Fuck, dude. And he's looking rough,
he quickly became one of my favorite characters in this comic. I mean, I know he's a bad guy, but he rules so hard.
Yeah, but he's not even a bad guy by choice. He got mutated by the pathogen.
He certainly did.
Synthetic. Like, he wasn't like David, who like had malicious intent. he had like this guy. Yeah, he got fucked with, dude.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's an interesting point. He had the pathogen injected into him, and then we saw it was a significant amount, and maybe that's the difference. But like the way David was fucking around with that pathogen, and the way that we're gonna see him fuck around with it in Covenant, like, do you think David somehow got affected by it? If not in a way that like would change his physical appearance, that like going by these rules that it heightens aggression and stuff like that. Do you think even, because we see him put it on his fingers, his bare fingertips in Prometheus, and clearly doing a lot with it in Covenant, right? In between the two movies. Do you think just exposure to it might have like affected his behavior?
I mean, that's certainly possible. It's not a thought I ever really like had or that occurred to me, but like that's a good point. That might. Yeah.
I didn't think about it until I read this, because I was like, oh, so this thing can affect synthetics, right? So I wonder if like David got a little splashed in his eye and then like started to fuck with him, Who knows?
But yeah, last we saw, Eldon was coming out of the forest and unlocks all of the doors and lets the xenomorphs in. What happens next?
So after that, we cut to the Percys, and Gal goes on board with his boys and Francis, and they all sort of make this agreement. They're like, yeah, you know what? We're going to get the fuck out of here. Right. So Angela's radioing to them like, hey, where are you? We need that support from you. We need you to shoot these motherfuckers. And his buddies are just like, come on, man. Like, you at least got to answer. Right. So he does. And he's like, hey, Captain, look, we took a vote. We are in flight, but there's a lot of these motherfuckers. So we're just going to leave. We're just out of here.
That is certainly what he does. Like, would you call that a mutiny? Like, he's not trying to take over and depose her as captain. Would it be just like what would you call that? Desertion, maybe?
This is desertion. This is he's gone AWOL, maybe.
Yeah, like I'm not exactly sure precisely like what type of charge that were to be if he were to like survive and get court-martialed back on Earth. Like I don't know specifically what they would actually be charging him with.
Yeah, but I mean, like I don't get it. I don't get the behavior. I wouldn't do this if I were in his position. But he just saw, like, he's seen these. First of all, he got his face cut by a little tiny monkey, and he's seen the xenomorphs tearing people apart. He's been on an alien ship, then seen the alien, the engineer, just absolutely destroying the xenomorphs that are killing everybody. He's seen the giant sharks, all of that kind of stuff. He's like, I'm out of here. This is not for me, I rather take my chances and make it out of here alive, right? Classic. There's always a character like that, right? In Aliens,
that's
right? Well, not always, but usually,
Yeah.
He's the Carter Burke of this.
He certainly is.
Yeah, man. So he's out of there. Like the last thing he says is "good luck down there" and "goodbye," and then he's flying off towards the Garyon or whatever it's called.
And that is the end of issue 3.
Yeah, man. Last issue. We're inside the Helios. Eldon and his boys, the Xenomorphs, are kind of just tearing through, right?
Oh, yeah. There is one guy who, a Xenomorph, is ripping his head off while simultaneously eating the face off of the head it's ripping off this guy's body.
Yeah, dude, it's nuts.
And I was like, come on, man, one or the other. Pick a lane.
Rest of the crew is trying to evacuate. The plan is to get out of the ship with the ATVs, whatever they are, the little golf carts.
I believe they're referred to as buggies in the comic.
The buggies, get it? Like the alien.
Yeah. There we go. Perfect.
And everyone's going to regroup inside the derelict, well, not the derelict, the crashed juggernaut. So a few of them make it out, not all of them, but a few of them do. And they're tearing through the jungle, running, like being chased by the Xenos, right? Being chased by the bugs, running over them. It's very well drawn, action-packed scene. But a chunk of people all make it back to the engineer craft.
Yep. There's one Xenomorph that gets run over and killed when somebody drives a buggy over it, and it actually does kill the Xenomorph. But when it dies, it bleeds all over the back treads, and so it stops running, and they have to get out and flee on foot, which I thought was like a very clever little way to get the buggy out of the way, you know?
Yeah, that was nice. And you see it actually trailing like the acid blood for a little while before it, like when it skids to a stop. Like you see skid marks, but the skid marks are alien blood.
Yeah, it rules. And once they get to the Juggernaut, we actually find out that apparently, like, Xenomorphs, like, well, for now, as far as we know, they, I guess, won't go near it. Like, they refuse to get close for some reason that we never really find out, because in very short order, they, in fact, do get close to it. So I don't even know why that was in there, but whatever.
Right. But what do we find inside this crashed Juggernaut from the Prometheus movie?
We find an entire, like, experimental genetics lab, as it turns out.
A functioning one, too, right?
Yeah, it certainly is. Like, the lights are still on and everything.
So this engineer that we've seen banging around on the planet has been doing genetic experiments inside this crashed ship. Do you think he was another survivor of the crash, like he was in a sleep pod somewhere else on the ship? Or do you think he was just on the planet and found the ship and got all of this stuff working again?
I mean, I had been operating under the assumption that it was like the other engineer we've been seeing wandering around in the comic, but like where he came from, I have no idea.
Right. Like I guess my question is, did they just not find his sleep pod in the movie? Or
I guess not.
Must have been. I wonder if he's like some weird outcast, or like maybe he walked away from his post, much in the way that Galgo did. And once the ship crashed, he like came. Who knows? I don't know, man.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe he just happened to be outside the ship when the quarantine hit, so he wasn't able to get inside it.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
It's not answered here, but we do see these cool genetic experiments that the guy's doing, growing and mutating life in these like orange pods on the walls.
Mm-hmm.
And there is like an engineer chair in the middle, which is pretty cool. I like that all of their technology is chair based.
It certainly is. Yeah. Oh, also, there's actually one scene that we missed. Like, it actually happens right before this.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
Earlier on, Captain Angela had messaged the captain of the Cadmos trainer to basically say that, you know, Galgo is like running off. He's gone. He's not coming for us. We need you to bring another ship down and pick us up. And he says, oh yeah, no problem. And then it cuts to some other stuff. And then there's a scene here where Galgo and his two men show up on the bridge of the Cadmos and kill every member of the bridge crew. Because I guess they just like don't want to get court-martialed.
Yeah.
And I believe that is also the last time we see Galgo in this comic.
It is.
I don't think he shows up again. Yeah, I didn't think so.
Yeah, that is a major scene, because now the team is absolutely stranded on this planet.
Yeah.
know? And Galgo is off in space with Francis in tow.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to see, I'm just going to touch on it now so we can wrap up that plot thread. We are going to see Eldon take control of the Helios and fly it off into space full of aliens in pursuit of Francis and Galgo. And
he's like monologuing the entire time about like conceptually what the idea of a friend is and what it means and how you have them and why you would have them. And then during that speech, it just kind of morphs into him going, I'm gonna kill that fucker Francis.
Yes. And he's talking to his alien buddies. Do you want to watch me kill my friend? I can still feel the needle going into my arm. It's pretty intense, right?
I liked how just over the course of this comic, he just kind of slowly like turned into the leader of the Xenomorphs. Like he's talking to them, and like while he's wandering around, they're following him where he goes and stuff. Like he just kind of like became like the general of the Xenomorphs, which I thought was kind of neat.
It's interesting because we know from movies and stuff that they kind of leave synthetics alone, right? For the most part. Like I know there's one major exception at the end of Aliens, but generally they leave synthetics alone because they don't really view them as threats, right? But
except this one is injected with pathogen.
So now, but now they're recognizing something similar on like a DNA level, presumably.
Yeah.
So they're like, no, he's one of us. He's our alpha. He's like the Chris Pratt in Jurassic World, and they're the Raptors, right?
Yes, that is correct.
He's like, this is Delta, this is Blue, she's the
absolutely
beta.
Not. No, you're done. I'm cutting this joke off right now.
Anyway,
But yeah, let's see. Well, I'm just trying to figure out where we left off. They found the lab and it still worked. And then after they're going through and looking at the lab, this is when we discover that, oh, no, actually, it turns out not all xenomorphs were scared to enter the ship, because now there is a whole bunch of them running towards the ship and piling into it. And there's even a couple climbing on the ceiling above them.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, classic alien infiltration shit. And everyone just starts kind of running for it in the dark here, right? Getting lost in the ship, trying to escape the monsters.
Well, almost everyone, because turns out Clara decided to be very smart and forward-thinking and stayed back in the lab to document a bunch of the stuff that she found.
Right.
Because if you recall, at the beginning, she was ostensibly filming a documentary about the trip.
Yes.
And when everyone was running off, her boyfriend James noticed she was gone and comes back, like meets back up to her in the lab, just as a couple of xenomorphs are about to descend upon them.
Yeah, man.
And then it cuts after that. We actually don't see what happens to them quite yet, because it cuts back to the rest of the group who, because it's dark, they're holding hands in a line all the way through.
Yes.
And then they do that classic scene where I love, where the second to last person turns around and sees that they're just holding a severed hand, which I absolutely fucking loved.
These pages were really good too.
It was great. And then after that, it's even in my notes it says, was holding a severed hand before a whole mass of Xenos descend upon the group. Wholesale slaughter, you love to see it, my dude.
Yeah, dude, it's rough.
Yeah, people get ripped in half. One or two people get the small mouth through their forehead. Someone gets spiked through the neck with the fucking spiked tail. It ruled. I loved it. I had a lot of fun reading those pages.
All the hits. Meanwhile, in the lab, Clara and James are kind of cowering in fear when in walks. They're face to face with xenomorphs, right about to get fucking ate, aren't they?
Yeah, I have it written in my notes as, just as James and Clara are accepting death together and declaring their love, what happens next?
Engineer man with big gun walks in. Again, just fucking strolls in.
Smooth and the fucking engineer just shows up with a huge rifle and starts just disintegrating xenomorphs. They never really show specifically what the gun does, but the tip of it unfolds like a flower, and it doesn't even shoot out a beam. When he pulls the trigger, it just creates a dome of red energy around him, and the xenomorphs are and some of them flee, some of them are just covered up by the light, so that in the illustration you don't actually see what happens to them. But he pulls out this gun and just starts going ham on him and kills a whole bunch of xenomorphs. The rest of them run off scared.
Yeah, so now Clara and James are they're safe, right? They're good. Everything worked out well for them. They're gonna say thank you to Mr. Engineer Man. They're literally saying thank you and introducing themselves to him when he just opens fire and wipes both of them out with the rifle, stepping on the ashes after they die as he walks away.
Yeah, they even show him a scene of him stepping on their ant sample they found earlier.
Yeah, dude. Intense.
Yeah, it was brutal. It was one of those things where it did kind of suck when I saw that happen, because I was oh, Clara, she was sort of ostensibly the main character. And then I really thought about it, and I was the last time she had a scene that focused on her was 3 pages into the first episode. I guess I don't really feel that bad about her suddenly dying when she's barely had any screen time.
They tried to check in with her a little bit with James on the ship with the aliens there, and her being worried about him and kind of being in radio contact with him. But I didn't connect the dots reading through.
Yeah, neither did I.
I had to go back through it to connect those dots.
Same.
Yeah, I mean, they're really interesting because she did start out as she's the first person we meet on the team, right? And
she is,
really a secondary character, but yeah, R.I.P. Clara and James.
Yeah, R.I.P. Clara and James. They loved each other too much for this world.
They did.
And then we actually get to what I was surprised to find out is the final scene of the comic, where there's only 3 remaining crew members left, there, which I believe was Captain Angela, and then Chris, who was on Angela's like rescue party, and then Chris's wife Jill, who was one of the few people that survived the attack on the Helios. And like it's just the 3 of them,
it's
and
the other couple, not Clara and James, Jill and Chris.
Yeah, the other couple, Jill and Chris, and they're fleeing, and they end up actually coming across the cave that Eldon and Francis were in. Oh, actually, I forgot. On the way there, as they're crossing over the lake, that pathogen canister they collected earlier, they say, fuck this, and toss that into the lake as they're running by it.
Good idea. Make the sharks bigger. Smart.
Oh, yeah. And then at this point is when they get to the cave that Eldon and Francis were in, and they have a brief conversation about how they might be here for a while, so they need to make this place a little bit more livable while they, like, do the research and try to figure out a way to either, I believe they phrase it as either get us up there or get them to come down here. Yeah. And then I was like, oh, okay, that's neat. And then I went to go turn the page, and that was the last page. And I was like, wait, what? That's how this comic ends? What?
That's how this comic ends. I mean, we might pick up with the adventures of Captain Angela and Jill and Chris and in a later Blood and Thunder series. But if you were like a big fan of Prometheus and went to see the Prometheus movie and then went to your comic book store to buy the Prometheus comic books, this is how that would end, and they would expect you to then purchase Aliens and Predator books as well to get the whole story.
Really roping you in, you know?
Yeah, that's the point, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that's the end of Prometheus Blood and again, about to do it. That's the end of Prometheus Fire and Stone.
Let me ask you.
Sure.
Did you like this more or less than the Prometheus movie?
So this is kind of what I was getting at before with I give comics like this a little bit of a pass in just doing wild shit that shakes things up, you know? Mm-hmm. I had a lot of fun reading this. I'm definitely interested in reading the rest of the Fire and Stone series. I like an Alien comic book. I've read plenty of them over the years. I like that this had Xenomorphs in it and a lot of classic Alien comic book action. I don't know that I liked it better than Prometheus overall. It didn't add to my enjoyment of Prometheus. It didn't detract from it either, like just as a companion piece. Like I'll probably watch the movie before I reread this again. You know what I mean?
Fair enough.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe about the same. Maybe I liked it about the same in a weird, but in different ways. I need to be very clear about that. Like I don't think
fair enough.
Yeah, I my enjoyment level was about the same, but I liked this as just like a fun, scary, bloody comic book romp versus like the experience of watching Prometheus, which is not a very action-packed movie at all.
It certainly isn't. Yeah. No, this is definitely more actiony than Prometheus is, for sure.
Right. Like Prometheus was like the Jurassic Park, and this was like the Jurassic World.
You just can't let those Jurassic World comparisons go, can
you? Really forcing them in right now. I got a lot of feelings about the new Jurassic World trailer. You know about those. I'm not going to go into them here.
I certainly do know about them. But yeah, like for me, it's like I think I enjoyed the visceral experience of like taking in the story and seeing the events of the comic more than I did of the movie, because at the end of the day, this is closer to what I'm looking for out of an Alien story than Prometheus is.
Oh, yeah.
But like, honestly, the fact that it's like a Prometheus tie-in feels like kind of irrelevant to me. Like how, like in Alien, you know, the events of Alien take place on LV-426, which is like a barren, lifeless rock where nothing is happening. Right. And then we cut to the sequel where 57 years later, there's like, you know, a thriving colony and like hundreds of people living there, but like it's the same place. But that place has now completely been terraformed, and it has a different name, to the point where what's really the point of making that be 426 when the only similarity, like the only way you can compare them, is that you go, oh yeah, that used to be that place before it got completely changed.
Right.
And it's like, this comic is kind of the same thing. It's like, this is LV223, but other than the fact that they told us it's on LV223, it may as well not be, because it in no way even vaguely resembles the 223 we just saw in the previous movie. So, like, why even bother, you know?
But there is a really interesting comparison there. Like, first of all, I disagree with you a little bit on why said aliens on the same planet. At that time, that was the only location we had for xenomorphs to come from, and we knew it was something the company was after.
All right, so, fair enough. I'll give you that one. Good point.
But this is a really interesting parallel to Prometheus Fire and Stone, where suddenly the barren planet has developed, like been terraformed and developed an ecosystem, compared to LV-426 and Alien to Aliens. The difference is it's not a human, it's not humans who have populated the planet. It's alien life forms. They kind of did take a page from the aliens, you know,
and
in the movies with that. That's pretty cool.
And on top of that, like you said earlier, unless there's something about it that I'm forgetting, the fact that the pathogen did this, or rather was able to do this to the moon, to 223,
right?
Like, this, as far as I can recall, seems to be a completely brand new ability that nothing about Prometheus indicated it had the ability to do that before.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
they were
they just kind of invented its ability to do that so that they could make this story be set there, I guess.
Yeah. Or was the actual truth that the engineer that we see with the biolab, did he create and start propagating all these species out in the wild? Maybe it's that. That's
a good point, because like those weird little guys that we see in his engineering lab, there is one in there that does kind of look like one of those monkeys. So maybe he did create them.
And then there were those large monsters, those large beasts. I shouldn't call them monsters just because they're weird looking, that were all dead in that field, you know, the killing field from early on. And I guess towards the end of issue 1. So maybe it's a little bit of both. Like, maybe this was experimentation and, you know, accidental, right? Because you know, we saw a little bit of it spill on some worms in the movie, and it created the whatever you call it.
Are you gonna remember?
No, the hydromorph. I don't fucking know. the snakeomorph.
I would say the snake guy is the
hammer Pete. I got it before you said it. The hammer Pete. So yeah, I mean, who knows, dude? But yeah, they were playing fast and loose with the pathogen to the point where I have no idea what it actually does. Did all of life get seeded from this thing? Did the engineer help it along? Is this a new engineer that's come to the planet because of this spill and is kind of helping it along? Who the fuck knows? Nobody knows. I mean, we'll never know.
Maybe they'll say in one of the later parts of Fire and Stone, or maybe they won't. Who knows?
Yeah, so a lot like the movie, this raised more questions than it answered.
It certainly did. But like I said, I don't know if I think it's better than the movie. Like you said, at the end of the day, I'll probably be going back to Prometheus before I go back to this comic. But right. I think I did overall enjoy the experience of the events of this comic probably more than Prometheus, because like, I cannot stress enough how fucking cool it is when a xenomorph shows up, man. Those guys rule. They're great. I love seeing them. And like, it's kind of hard for me to even determine whether I like this better than Prometheus or not, because the fact this actually has xenomorphs in it gives it such a huge, massive, like unfair balance the scales like weight to me that I don't even know which one of the two I like better, because like at the end of the day I'm like, this is the one that has xenomorphs in it, you know?
Yeah, and like they were really doing a lot of work to tie Prometheus stuff into the Alien universe in a way that the movie didn't. Like,
in a way that the movie did not. That is a great, great point.
Yeah, and like my opinion of Prometheus, the film, is still they shouldn't have done any of it. They shouldn't have even tried to hint at a xenomorph. They should have just let it be engineers without, like, let the engineers exist as their own thing without a tie to the Xenomorph, and let's see where that goes. But because they sowed those scenes in, those seeds, this book picked those up and ran with it to the point of, like, deacon sharks, right? Which, again, fucking ruled. This has, like, if this had been a movie, this has, like, a, like, early 90s Dimension sequel, you know, like Dimension Studios, like Crow City of Angels, or fucking, I got another one, hold on, like from Dusk Till Dawn 2 vibes, where they're like, we're gonna take that popular movie and we're just gonna crank the dial up on parts of this and make it fucking wild, you know. Like,
for sure,
for better and worse, of course. Like, there are good versions of that and bad versions of that. Yeah, man, I don't know, this is an interesting companion to Prometheus because it does kind of follow through on some of the things that they set up in that, but at the end of the day, you know, it's not a movie, so ultimately it probably doesn't count that much to the direction, doesn't matter that much to the direction that the movies are going to go in.
Yeah, because if what the comics did was relevant in any way to what happened in the movies, like all of those dozens and dozens and dozens of Dark Horse comics, like during the late 80s and all through the 90s, would have, like, mattered to the movies going forward from there, and they clearly don't. So
yeah, man, wouldn't it be cool to see, like, the way that Disney handles Marvel now handles their Star Wars license, or how they kind of tailor their superhero books to, like, be more in line with the MCU? Like, could you see a future where Marvel's Alien books are sitting in continuity with the movies, and they are informing the direction that the movies and the TV show go in, and back and forth? Like that was unheard of at the time.
Yeah.
But that's pretty commonplace now. Like, even the Young Justice cartoon that DC, or that Warner Brothers makes, the DC Comics Young Justice cartoon, had comic book tie-in issues that were in continuity with the show. Like, it can happen, you know. I'd be really interested in seeing if that's the case as this new Marvel ongoing series kind of rolls out, and as the new movies and TV shows and stuff start getting made.
I mean, I'd be fine with it if the comics were canon to the movies, but part of that is because I read the ongoing Marvel comic. So since I read it, I would like to not necessarily see that stuff represented, but I would like to see those stories actually be relevant. I would like to know that the time I spent reading them wasn't effectively wasted. But, like, at the end of the day, if the movies don't bring up those events, whatever, what are you going to do, you know?
Yeah, it'd be nice to see little nods to them, like when like Alien Isolation, we get little nods in some of the novels and that kind of stuff. I mean, connecting the universe, one cohesive sort of canon would be interesting, because there's still plenty of room to do weird stories disconnected, and it's just getting the mythology correct, you know? It's getting the origin and everything correct.
Exactly.
Anyway, we'll see how it goes.
We certainly will.
For now, I think it's time for us to enter hypersleep until our next episode. You like that? I just came up with that.
I love it. Beautiful. I'm kissing my fingers like a Italian chef, you know?
Oh, you are the ship's cook. No, you're the doctor. You should have been the cook.
Yeah. You're right, I should have. Oh, well.
All right, Ship Dr. Kenny, where can people find you on the internet if they want to get some medical advice?
I am on Twitter. My handle is at CYHOBBEZ. Feel free to follow me. I don't really tweet that often, but when I do, you can be sure that it is an absolute heater. So come by and give me some likes, give me a follow. Hell, if I think you're cool, I might even follow you back. No guarantees.
Bangers only on that Twitter account.
That's right. You heard it here first.
You can find me on Twitter at Final Neal, or on Instagram at Final Neal Retro. I post my old game collection there. It's the game collection isn't, it's not old in the, like, that I don't have it anymore. It's a collection of old games.
And he has a lot of them, folks. That's for sure.
Gonna edit that out. No, I'll leave it in. Follow the show on Twitter at Crew Expendapod. That's right, Crew Expendapod. And we have a website, crewexpendable.net. You can find links to the podcast on all the podcast platforms, and there will be other stuff there eventually, I'm sure. Find links to our social media, etc. Subscribe to the show in your podcast app. Rate it and review it. Give us good 5-star ratings. Follow us on Good Pods. Review us over there. Shout out to Dan. I saw that right as we started recording this, he reviewed our first episode 5 stars.
Nice.
We haven't even launched officially.
We certainly haven't. I believe, actually, this is, if I understand correctly, I believe this will be the first episode we'll be releasing after we officially launch for sure.
Yeah. So welcome to the show.
I believe we determined that we're going to be releasing new episodes on Tuesdays, I believe is what we finally decided on.
Something like that. Yeah, we're going to work that out. We're going to try for that for sure.
Yeah, that's the plan anyway.
So subscribe in your podcast app. Don't miss an episode. And
that's right.
We will be back next week to talk. I think we're going to start entering the Alien Covenant era of the podcast.
I believe we're about done up on Prometheus stuff, like unless we wanted to cover the first part of Life and Death, which I think we determined we were going to save for later. So
yeah, we gotta save something for the back end of this. No, I think we're going to move into the Covenant universe. Honestly, I'm just jonesing for some aliens after reading this. So
tell me about it.
We'll figure that out, and we will be back with more Crew Expendable. So until then, everybody,
stay frosty.